What if a single message from Johnny Depp could stop millions of people mid-scroll and leave them staring at their screens in complete silence? Not a movie trailer, not a court statement, just a quiet note he posted that suddenly made the entire internet pause. In a world full of noise and endless content, one short message from him cut through everything and left fans reeling. The words were simple, yet the reaction was massive. People shared it nonstop, comments flooded in, strangers argued and connected over the same few lines. This is the message that left the entire internet shaking, and the reason it still echoes today. The message appeared quietly on his official Instagram account on a January day that otherwise felt ordinary to most people scrolling through their feeds, yet within hours it had spread across platforms and conversations like something impossible to ignore because Johnny Depp had taken the time to speak directly to the people who had followed his work for years, and the words carried a weight that went beyond the usual celebrity. Update had started with a simple greeting wishing everyone a happy new year before shifting into something more urgent and personal. He explained that it had been brought to his attention that online scammers were intensifying their efforts to target his fans and supporters, creating multiple deceptive social media and email accounts that impersonated him and members of his team. The part that truly stopped people was the clear acknowledgement of how far technology had come today. I can create the illusion of my face and voice. He wrote, scammers may look and sound just like the real me, but neither I nor my team will ask you for money or your personal information. That's single admission about artificial intelligence, turning a familiar face and voice into a tool for deception. Hit differently because it confirmed what many had already sensed in quieter corners of the internet, yet hearing it from him made the threat feel immediate and real. He went on to list the only accounts that belonged to him. This page at Johnny Depp is my only account on Instagram. My only Facebook account is Johnny Depp. My only TikTok account is Johnny Depp. He made it plain that he was not on X, Twitter, Snapchat, or Discord, and that he did not offer paid meetings, phone calls, club memberships, or fan cards. If anyone ever asked for money for any of those things, it was a scam. He added that he did not interact directly with fans on any social media platforms via email or through chat-based platforms like Telegram, WhatsApp, Signal, or Zangi, and he closed by repeating that neither his team, his agent, nor his family would ever contact anyone on his behalf asking for money or personal information. The post was signed simply JD, and team, and that was all. No dramatic language, no long explanations, just a straightforward warning rooted in protection. The reaction across the internet was swift and layered. People began sharing screenshots within minutes, some pausing their usual scrolling to read every line carefully, others forwarding it to friends and family with notes that said, "This is important, check this right now." Comments poured in from long time supporters who admitted they had received strange messages in the past claiming to be from him or someone close to him. Some described near misses where they had almost sent money or shared details before. Something felt off. Others shared stories of friends or relatives who had already lost significant amounts to similar schemes, and the fact that the Federal Trade Commission had received nearly 200 complaints specifically about scammers posing as him, according to reports that circulated around the same time, gave the warning a layer of documented reality that made it harder to dismiss as mere caution. The II element especially unsettled people because it moved the threat out of the realm of obvious fake accounts with bad spelling and into something more sophisticated and harder to spot. A voice that sounded exactly like his, a face that matched photographs from recent public appearances. A conversation that felt personal enough to lower defenses. Fans talked about how the message made them feel seen in a way that was rare for someone of his visibility. Instead of staying silent or letting the problem grow, he had chosen to step forward and put the safety of the people who supported him first, and that choice resonated deeply in an online space that often feels cold and transactional. Many described a quiet sense of relief mixed with a renewed awareness that even the most recognizable figures were not immune to the darker sides of digital life. The timing added another layer because it came at the start of a new year when people were already reflecting on trust and connections, and the post arrived like a steady hand on the shoulder, reminding everyone to stay careful without creating panic. It did not accuse or point fingers. It simply laid out the facts and offered clear boundaries that anyone could follow, and that clarity is what kept the conversation going long after the initial wave of shares. Some fans posted about how they'd immediately gone through their message requests and blocked anything suspicious. Others talked about educating older relatives who might not recognize the signs of an AI-generated video or voice note. The discussion expanded beyond his own circle as people began comparing notes on similar warnings from other public figures, yet this one stood out because of the personal tone and the detailed list of official channels that left little room for confusion. Reports from outlets covering the post noted that the actor and his team were actively working to combat the schemes, which added a sense of ongoing effort rather than a one-time announcement. The emotional connection many felt came from the honesty of the language. There was no attempt to soften the reality of the threat or to turn it into a larger statement about technology. He simply named what was happening and drew a firm line around what he and those closest to him would never do, and in doing so, he gave fans a practical tool they could use immediately. That practicality mixed with the care behind the words is what made the message linger in conversations for days and weeks. People returned to. And when new scam attempts appeared quoting the lines about never asking for money or personal information as a kind of shared reminder, the internet shook not because of scandal or spectacle, but because a familiar voice had spoken with unusual directness about something that affected ordinary people in their daily online lives. The moment captured a rare intersection of celebrity presence and everyday vulnerability, where the distance that fame usually creates briefly narrowed, and supporters felt the weight of someone looking out for them even from far away. As the post continued to circulate, individuals shared personal reflections about times they had almost been drawn into similar traps, only to pull back at the last second, and the collective sharing of those near misses created a sense of community around the warning itself. Some noted how the message arrived without fanfare or promotion, yet still managed to cut through the noise of endless content because the content itself mattered. The clarity of the language helped two short sentences that left no ambiguity about what was real and what was not, and the repetition of the key point that neither he nor anyone associated with him would ever reach out for financial or personal details drove the message home. Without needing dramatic flair over time, the discussion shifted toward broader questions of digital trust and how technology that can mimic faces and voices so convincingly changes the way people interact online, yet the core of the reaction remained tied to the original post and the protective intent behind it. Fans spoke of feeling a quiet gratitude that he had taken the time to address the issue publicly rather than leaving them to navigate the risks alone, and that gratitude showed up in the steady stream of comments thanking him for the clarity and the care of the story of. The message did not end with the initial wave of attention because new reports of similar scams continued to surface, and each time people circled back to the same post as a reference point that documented existence of nearly 200 complaints filed with the Federal Trade Commission, provided an external confirmation that the problem was real and measurable rather than anecdotal, and that factual grounding helped. The conversation stay focused on practical awareness instead of speculation or fear. For many, the lasting impact came from the simple recognition that someone they had admired for years through films and music had chosen to use his platform in that moment, not for promotion, but for protection. And that choice created a moment of collective pause across timelines and group chats where people stopped and considered their own online habits more carefully. The message itself remained available on the official account, serving as a permanent reminder that could be revisited whenever doubt arose, and the continued presence of those words helped sustain a quieter, ongoing vigilance among supporters. The way the internet responded revealed something about the hunger for genuine connection, even in a digital space that often prioritizes speed and spectacle. People were moved by the straightforward honesty and the absence of any attempt to turn the warning into something larger than it needed to be. It was a practical note written for the people it was meant to reach, and that focus is what gave it its power. The conversations that followed often returned to the same details of specific platforms. He named the clear statement about never requesting money or information, the acknowledgement of how convincingly I could replicate a person in each retelling reinforced the original intent to keep fans safe rather than to generate attention. The emotional thread running through the reactions was one of mutual care. Supporters had stood by him through many chapters of his public life, and in this instance, he had returned that support by looking out for their safety in a concrete way. That circle of regard is what made the moment feel significant beyond the usual cycle of online content. The message left its mark not through volume or controversy, but through the quiet force of someone choosing to speak when silence would have been easier, and the internet felt that choice and responded with a collective stillness that briefly cut through the constant motion of feeds and notifications. In the days that followed, people continued to reference the post when helping others identify suspicious messages, and the shared language of the warning became a kind of shorthand for caution that traveled far beyond the original audience. The realness of the concern combined with the clarity of the response created a rare instance where a public statement managed to feel both personal and useful at the same time, and that combination is what kept the conversation alive long after the first wave of shares had slowed. The story of the message remains a reminder of how a few carefully chosen words can still cut through the noise when they come from a place of genuine concern and when they address a threat that touches everyday lives in tangible ways. The internet shook because for a moment, the distance between a well-known figure and the people who follow his work narrowed into something more human and protective, and that narrowing left a lasting impression on everyone who stopped to read the words and take them to heart. As the days turned into weeks, the conversation around the message continued in quieter corners of group chats and comment sections where people returned to the words not for spectacle, but for the practical guidance they offered. Some fans described printing the list of official accounts and keeping it nearby as a quick reference. Others shared how they had used the exact phrasing from the post when warning relatives who were less familiar with the risks of digital imitation, the protective tone of the note seemed to create a shared sense of responsibility among supporters who began looking out for one another more carefully, reporting suspicious accounts and reminding each other that neither Johnny Depp nor anyone close to him would ever reach out asking for money, or personal details that collective vigilance grew from the original post and gave the moment a longer life than most online content usually receives. The documented background of nearly 200 complaints filed with the Federal Trade Commission, according to reports that surfaced around the same period, provided an external layer of confirmation that the concern was grounded in real experiences rather than speculation, and that factual foundation helped keep discussions focused on awareness instead of exaggeration. People spoke openly about the emotional weight of receiving a warning that felt personal, even though it was addressed to millions. The acknowledgement that artificial intelligence could now replicate a face and voice so convincingly forced many to confront how thin the line had become between what looked authentic and what was. Carefully constructed, the message did not dwell on fear. It simply named they reality and offered clear boundaries that anyone could apply immediately, and that balance is what allowed the conversation to remain useful. Rather than alarming over time, individuals began sharing their own close calls in more detail, describing messages that had arrived with images or voice notes that seemed almost perfect until a small inconsistency or the sudden request for money revealed the deception. Many credited the post with giving them the language and the confidence to pause and question rather than react, and that pause became a quiet form of protection that spread through personal networks. The internet continued to shake in smaller waves whenever a new wave of similar attempts appeared, because people would circle back to the same words as a reliable reference point. The simplicity of the language helped it travel across different groups and age ranges without losing its meaning. Short, clear sentences that left little room for misinterpretation, and a firm repetition of the key point that no one associated with him would ever ask for financial or personal information. The absence of any attempt to turn the warning into a larger statement about technology or fame kept the focus where it belonged on the safety of the people reading it. That restraint gave the message a kind of quiet authority that felt rare in a space often filled with louder claim. Supporters talked about feeling a renewed sense of connection, not because the post was dramatic, but because it demonstrated care in a concrete, practical way. The distance that usually exists between a public figure and the audience narrowed for a moment into something more human, and that narrowing left people with a lasting impression of being looked after rather than simply entertained. Some described rereading the post weeks later when they encountered a new suspicious message and finding the same steady clarity that had first made them stop scrolling. The ongoing effort mentioned in the note that the team was actively working to combat the schemes added a sense of continuity. That the warning was not a one-time announcement, but part of a longer commitment to protection, and that detail reassured many who worried the problem would simply continue unchecked. The emotional thread that ran through the reactions remained one of mutual regard. Fans who had followed his work across years of films and music felt that the message returned a measure of the support they had offered, and that reciprocity created a quieter, deeper resonance than any promotional statement could have achieved. Conversations often returned to the specific details, the official handles, the platforms he was not on, the clear statement about never offering paid meetings or fan cards, and each retelling reinforced the original purpose of keeping people safe. The realness of the concern combined with the absence of exaggeration allowed the discussion to stay grounded and useful long after the initial surge of attention had passed. People continued to reference the post when helping others identify red flags, and the shared language became a kind of practical shorthand that traveled through private messages and family group chats. The lasting power of the moment came from the recognition that a few carefully chosen words could still cut through the constant motion of digital life when they addressed a genuine risk with honesty and clarity. The internet had paused because the message arrived without fanfare, yet carried a weight that felt personal and protective, and that pause created space for reflection about trust and caution in an environment where appearances can be so easily manufactured. The story of the note continued to unfold in the small, everyday decisions people made after reading it. The decision to verify and account before responding, the decision to ignore a request that asked for money, the decision to share the warning with someone who might need it. Those ordinary acts of care multiplied across countless individual feeds and kept the original intent alive. The message itself remained. Available on the official account, serving as a steady reference that could be revisited whenever doubt or a new attempt appeared, and the continued presence of those words helped sustain a quieter, ongoing awareness among supporters. The way the conversation evolved revealed a hunger for statements that felt useful rather than performative, and this one met that need by focusing entirely on the practical protection of the people. It was meant to reach the emotional connection many described came from the sense that someone they had admired for years had chosen in that moment to use his platform for their safety rather than for any other purpose. And that choice created a lasting impression of regard that went beyond the usual cycle of online content. As more time passed, the discussion occasionally widened to include broader reflections on how technology that can mimic voices and faces so convincingly changes the nature of digital interaction. Yet the core of the reaction stayed tied to the original post and the clear boundaries it had drawn, the honesty of the language. The detailed list of official channels and the firm repetition that neither he nor his team would ever ask for money or personal information continue to serve as a reliable guide, and that reliability is what allowed the message to keep its relevance long after the first wave of shares had slowed the internet shook, not through volume or controversy, but through the quiet force of a straightforward warning that addressed a real threat with care and clarity. And the lasting effect of that moment was the way it encouraged people to look out for one another with the same practical attention. The post itself had shown the story remains a reminder that even in a crowded digital landscape, a few honest words spoken with the intention of protection can still create a collective pause and leave a lasting impression on everyone who stops long enough to take them to heart. The continued circulation of the note in private conversations and the ongoing use of its language as a shared reference point demonstrate how a single clear message can travel farther and last longer when it is rooted in genuine concern for the safety of others, and that is the quiet, enduring power that first made the entire internet stop and listen. If this message from Johnny Depp made you stop and think the way it did for so many others, then share this with someone who might need the same. Reminder, leave a comment about the moment that stood out most to you. And let others know how the warning helped you stay careful online. The more people who carry these clear words forward, the harder it becomes for anyone to take advantage of the trust that fans give so freely. Keep the conversation going and stay safe out there.